Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Kev Ole Podcast. This is not the hockey podcast. I had to almost stop myself from saying that. Of course, follow us on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter, KEVOLE. You can like the Kev Ole Podcast on Facebook, where we are live. Also, as well, youtube.com, Kevin Olenek. You can subscribe there as well, as it is the return of this podcast after about a 2-year hiatus. Went back to school to BCIT for a couple of years. Did bring it back briefly over the off season about a year or so ago, and was just focused more on school. But now I've graduated and bringing it back. We will be working on some things like themes and things like that as we go through. But it's sort of how do we put it here? It's like getting the car out and just feeling how it is still driving. And then once we know how it drives, we will then know what needs to be fixed. Is that the way to look at it? That's a no. So yeah, and then we will also be looking at ways that you can support the podcast financially if you wish to do that. There will be no pressure. I will not beg, but I will ask politely, and we're still determining that. And so, hope you are all doing well, and we are taking. And one of the things that I want to do a little bit more of with this podcast is we do talk a lot of political stuff, and that still will be a part of the conversation. But there's also some things more of a human interest part that we don't always get into. And it's one of the things that I also want to take a little bit more time to do as we get on with this. And today, with our first topic, we're doing exactly that when we're talking about writing a book. And I know that that's probably been on the mind of a number of people through of their bucket list, that they've always wondered what it was like to write a book and what is that whole process like. And maybe there's avid readers out there. But our guests today are part of the writing profession. They have gotten money to and have worked on books. We have Melody Owen from Author Nation, writer, editor, coach, huge supporter of the work I've done. So I had to bring her on as the first guest in return. How are you?
I'm great, thank you, Kevin. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Feeling getting the cobwebs out.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. And our guest as well is the author of a book called Gone Viking, a travel saga, and Gone Viking 2, Beyond Boundaries. Also has done some work at Simon Fraser University and a number of other things. Poet as well. And Bill Arnott, how are you?
Morning, Kevin. I'm really well. Thank you. And it's a pleasure and a privilege to be part of the show. And what a treat to be on the show with my friend and mentor, Melody. And so, yeah, as part of Author Nation. So thank you very much. And congrats on your BCIT studies. That's another very cool and a huge hurdle.
Yeah.
So well done.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, yeah, was quite the experience going through a pandemic. Maybe that may be a whole episode in and of itself too. One day. Anyway, I'm rambling. We're here for you, not me. So let's get, but I wanted to start sort of with your journey of how you got to where you got. And I'll start with Bill first. Sort of how did you get into the writing profession, the idea, how did you do that, and sort of what has inspired you to write?
Well, I suppose I got serious about it. I had a fairly traditional job for many, many years and then started writing on the side, I think like a lot of authors, before you realize, you can actually, in fact, make money as a writer and author. So I started a little indie label where I self-published my own work and then doing that sort of distribution that many writers are maybe familiar with. And I still have a facet of that going on. But in the last few years, I leapt into writing full-time. That is my full-time gig. A blend of fiction, nonfiction, poetry. These travel memoirs have been, I've been delighted with the success of Gone Viking, a travel saga. It's won some literary awards, and Gone Viking 2, Beyond Boundaries, is hitting retailers' shelves this fall. So that's been a very fun journey, and I've been delighted with the connection with readers, and then making friends amongst all of our indie bookstore sellers, as well as chain stores and what have you. But I got to, again, tip my hat to Melody Owen and Author Nation. A couple of years ago, they were very, very kind and supportive as I was making that leap into full-time authorship, and creating a platform to not only network and meet and support each other, fellow writers, not only around Greater Vancouver, but beyond, which I should mention, that's where I am right now, which is Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh land in downtown Vancouver is where my wife and I live. And I made a point of choosing my background. This is a Robert Bateman painting of the Lou Tas, the wave biter a canoe from Haida Gwaii. And that took a bit of a starring role in my Gone Viking travel saga. So many waterborne travels in that nonfiction memoir. So it was that sort of process and I still like keeping a hand in that indie publishing, where you can, in my mind, perhaps say whatever you want to say in the manner that you want to say it, but also being able and very fortunate to pay the bills with magazine articles and columns and these nonfiction travel memoirs that you mentioned. There's my own version of a rambling answer, but hopefully that touches on some of the points you were asking about, Kev.
Sure. Just for those who don't know, can you expand on independent publishing a bit? Just what is that?
Sure. So, and I know Melody can expand on this along with me, but that label, that moniker, has sort of morphed over time. In the past, as a writer, you would maybe either get into a traditional publisher, which is a publishing house. That's someone that helps you. Basically, they're probably going to, if you've got a manuscript that you've created, they're probably going to provide you with an editor and a copywriter and a proofreader and perhaps a publicist and a marketing individual or team to help you get your book, your works out there into stores and distributors and retailers and onto shelves. Alternately, you could be an independent publisher, and we use the term self-publishing in the past, and there's also versions now we'd call hybrid publishing, where there's other businesses that are willing either to help you publish your work and provide some of those services, but you'd also be on your own for facets of that cost and effort, or a full independent publishing you may just do yourself. There's things like KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, part of the Amazon network, where you can literally upload your Word document, and with a little bit of time and effort on their software, you can have a book, an ebook, or a paper, trade paperback, even a hardcover book, ready to be sold and distributed once you've created that manuscript and perhaps formatted it in a manner that you like. Our Vancouver Public Library system has had some wonderful programs where you can learn their free software and make a book for virtually no cost, but a little bit of time, effort, and education. So yeah, indie publishing is just a short form of independent publishing, which means you're doing some or all of it on your own, and you pony up the cost, and then in theory you have all the potential remuneration or benefits from the book sales. Whereas if you're working with a traditional publisher, you'd negotiate a contract, they'll take over a lot of the responsibilities, and you'd get a royalty or a share of your book sales and residuals. How did I do, Melody?
That was excellent. That was
Okay.
I'll add that self-publishing is a broader term, because within self-publishing we have vanity presses. Like if you just want one book for your family, or things like that. And so indie publishing is a term that is very specifically, I'm publishing my own work for the public, whereas self-publishing is a little bit broader. There's the hybrid, there's the vanity, there's the indie, kind of all fits under the self-publishing, really. But yeah, excellent explanation, Bill. And thank you for the kind words, by the way. You're always so generous.
Melody, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. I've been teaching language and teaching writing most of my life in Asia, South America, and Canada. And so at some point I decided to start, or actually I took over a group called Author Nation because I was already working with authors. And so locally here in Vancouver, I took over a group called Author Nation, and I ran monthly events, and people would come out. We did author interviews, and we did expert talks once a month. And then COVID happened and everything was shut down. So I said, you know what, I'm going to turn it into a YouTube channel. That way the same excellent content that authors have been asking for will get to more authors. And so now it's a YouTube channel, and I do some videos on my own, just giving out information, reviewing books, or talking about self-publishing or writing or promotion. But I also do weekly live interview shows with nonfiction authors and with publishing and writing experts as well. So that's kind of the Author Nation side.
So maybe let's touch. You mentioned COVID, so I
Sure.
mean, not that we're talking about specifically COVID, but I wonder, and you obviously, because you did your monthly events, you've come online. In terms of the writing perspective, the writing industry overall,
Mm-hmm.
was there a significant change with the pandemic? I.e., did you get more people that were more interested because they had more time to write, or this was the opportunity for some, and we're seeing this in some ways that people are not necessarily wanting to go back to that 9-to-5 traditional job and are more willing or interested in working from home. Did you see more of that come up?
Yeah, what's really interesting is I saw two very distinct things happening with writers or with people who wanted to write a book. One, some of the authors I work with, when the pandemic hit, because they are extroverts and they're very social, or even when they're introverts but love the support, that kind of, in-person socializing, that helped motivate them and inspire them to go home and write. And when they lost those connections, writing became a huge, difficult task. And so I had some writers coming to me saying, I've stopped writing. I can't write. I just can't connect to it anymore. And then I had other people coming going, hey, I have time to write a book. How do I do that? Right now I can take on a project that I've been wanting to do forever, but everything's gotten in the way. And now I'm kind of sitting here going, well, what do I do? Because I've been laid off or whatnot. So I've actually seen in the writing perspective, two sides of it. People who have COVID created struggles in the writing, and where COVID created opportunity to write. So I think it really depends on the person and where they were and how they write and how they interact and socialize and their personalities, right?
Bill, what about you?
Well, I'm going to refer to a specific initiative of Melody's that happened early during our lockdown, so spring of 2020 and early days. And certainly in my ignorance, and perhaps for many of us, we were just feeling more inconvenienced than anything with lockdowns. This was before loved ones started dying, and we realized the severity of this situation. But looking for these outlets, and there was a great sense in that first month of lockdown of connectivity. And you had artists that were used to perhaps performing or sharing in live public venues, finding these new outlets. And Melody, with some colleagues, this is a sidebar to Author Nation, another one of Melody's initiatives. There was a video challenge where I did a 2-week online course. And we created, those of us participating, it was a really nice group, just how best to make some videos. So some folks had products they wanted to share. Others perhaps just looking to build a business or just have some fun and connect with some folks and get creative. And so I sort of went back and forth between my two hats of just having a fun, creative, artistic outlet and thinking down the road to, perhaps as an author with books to share and writing to promote, that could be a fun sort of multimedia venue or outlet. Had it not been for lockdown and COVID, that may not have existed. That wouldn't have necessarily crossed my desk or plate. But because of it, not only did I make some wonderful new friends, but found this lovely artistic outlet that has helped to springboard my activity as a writer, and that connection and that creativity, and then getting some skills along with it. That was a wonderful takeaway. You want to talk about a silver lining through all those difficult times and challenges. So again, a thank you to Melody, but there was a great example of some positive stuff to come from the start of what has become a very difficult time for so many.
Yeah, and we had a lot of fun doing those videos. And Bill, some of your videos were just so much fun. So I recommend people. Are they on your YouTube? Do you have a YouTube channel that they're on now, Bill?
They would be on my Bill Arnott YouTube channel. Yes.
Okay. Awesome. I recommend people look them up, because Bill got to the end of the internet one day. It's great. Go look them up. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Melody. And what I like about that is it's pure fun. Those are not about selling anything or promoting. It's just a little escape, a 30-second laugh, hopefully, and
yes.
Like that.
And they were brilliant. I think that was something that was really important. I started an author mastermind, so once a month, anyone who wants to come and talk about their writing and anything they're struggling with can join the mastermind. It's just a free, open. I only have so many spots each month, but just an open place to talk about the struggles. And that's something I started during COVID as well, is just having a place for authors to come and talk about their struggles. So yeah, I've tried to not just put videos on, but have workshops. I did some storytelling workshops. We did the video challenge. I've done some kind of masterminds and coaching. So we've had a lot going on to try to help people get through the challenge, right?
So what has been, what is one challenge, even COVID or not, what is one challenge right now that is current for writers that you're seeing? With common, like as we talked about the analogy of driving the car. So let's use that same analogy. They get out the car, they're driving it. What is the first thing that you notice that they need to fix?
Yeah, it depends on, there's so many different types of authors, but there is, and Bill will be able to speak to this. There's the author who they would like to be able to write full time. They'd like to be a full-time writer. They'd like to be producing books of fiction or nonfiction or poetry or all three or personal stories or whatnot. And yet they're also working full time, and they might have a family, or they might be caring for an elderly parent, or they might, who knows, right? There's something. There's something going on. And so, where do they find the time to write? Because writing a book is not a simple undertaking, right? It's like climbing a mountain. There are many, many steps. You have to keep going. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so making that transition, like getting that first couple, because you don't publish one book and become a superstar author and make billions of dollars and quit your day job and sit by the beach and write every morning, right? No, you don't. It's shocking. I know. And so it's that struggle of like getting from like leaving a job and getting to a place where you can write. And I know some people do it in retirement. Some people, they set aside a certain amount of time each week to do that. But I think that can be a huge hurdle for people who want to write and who want to do it in a more, some people don't always make all of their money from it, but they want something back from it. And Bill, you were talking about the leap you made. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about that. There's that transition time, right? Where what do I do? How do I make that leap, right? And still feed my family.
In my situation, I was fortunate in that we're a 2-income household. So it wasn't as though it was either earn or not earn. So there was a transition there that was easier, and I appreciate that's easier than some. But for those of us that are making that leap, there was still that period of time. Okay, you're writing when you're not working or raising your family. In other words, I'm going to get by with a few hours less sleep each night if this particular goal is that important to me. And that is part of that process. My Gone Viking, a travel saga, that was an 8-year project. So it's not something you're banging out. And I do enjoy and learn from some of the online workshops that the Amazon self-publishing offers. But invariably, I find many of these folks banging out a book a month. And that part of me thinks that's admirable, and part of me thinks, I suspect that's rubbish, but it's not always. That's not fair. If someone has a very high daily word count and they can in fact monetize their writing, because there's readers that love that stuff, and I'm generalizing and painting with a terribly wide brush, but I also know so many of my peers and friends who I admire and are writing very good literary content. That stuff ain't coming out on a book a month kind of a basis. So then for those of us making that transition, you're finding outlets, magazines, journals. Where can I scrape together some dollars and get my stuff out there and build that audience and make these connections with readers? Because at the end of the day, if folks are enjoying an article, perhaps through Writers Union or Canadian Authors Association or Author Nation and other trade journals and literary journals, invariably these are going to be folks that want to buy your books down the road. So it's all about that nice connection and networking. That helped a lot in making that leap to full-time writing and writing income.
So do you have to, I recognize that I'm probably asking a pretty broad question when I ask this, but do you need to finish the book before you start the promotion? Or is that promotion part of, if you're going to sell the book? And I understand there's probably people out there that just want to write something very privately, right? But if you want to sell your book, is this something that is part of the writing journey, like before you're done, after you're done? When do you recommend starting that?
Melody, you or I to start? What do you think?
Go ahead, Bill. I'll pop in.
Okay, so something I hear, I've certainly experienced it myself, and I hear now all the time from writer friends and colleagues is if they're newer to the business, they think, oh, I thought writing the book was the hard part, but then the work starts. And to answer your question, Kev, it doesn't start when the book is completed. Your authors, and even if you're part of a large publishing house with publicists, and I'm fortunate to have a team at Rocky Mountain Books, RMB, Rocky Mountain Books. But at the end of the day, we as authors and artists, it's imperative that you share your voice and you become your own brand. And even if you're writing under a pseudonym, readers, and I speak personally as well, I want to know a little bit about the authors that I'm reading. Readers want that sense of connection, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. Who is this that I'm, shelling out $25, $30 of my hard-earned money and perhaps committing a couple of weeks of my time? Who is this person, and do I want to stick with them, and that whole process? So the marketing is happening, I would say, before, during, and after, and the serious promotions are occurring when that book is in the process of getting to retail shelves, perhaps while you're doing speaking gigs or signing events. That's an ongoing thing. I've seen too many friends build up, for example, to a book launch, singular event, and they fill a room with friends and supporters and relatives and sell a number of books, and then that's it. Whereas if you're coming, I would encourage folks to come at it with a business mindset. You're creating an ongoing entity. This is something that should last in perpetuity if the work is there and good and stands alone. And so that marketing process is, I hate to say it, it could be an equal or a greater percentage of this equation than the actual writing.
Yeah, good points, Bill. When I work with authors and they're starting out, what I usually say is, right now, while you're thinking about writing this book, figure out how it's going to fit into your life. Are you going to write one book and it fits into your business somehow? Are you writing a memoir that you just want out in the world, and how many it sells is not important to you? Are you becoming an author entrepreneur where this is a business and you need a brand? Think about that beforehand, before you dive in, to make sure that you are prepared for the work level that you're getting yourself into, and that you understand the work you need to put in, and how that levels out with the rewards you might get, whether they are monetary or personal, or it's like, why do people climb mountains? Why do people write books? Why do people lift heavy weights? Because they can, and it's a challenge. And if that's all you're doing, it's like, yeah, this is a personal project. I just want to be able to say I wrote a book. Then that's very different than what, for example, Bill's doing. He's got, he's built a brand. He's got a team behind him. If you look at what Bill's doing online, he's this ongoing presence where he is the author, and people can come and learn about him and learn about what he's doing. And the book that he's about to publish, he's been talking about it. It's not a big secret. And then all of a sudden, boom, we have a book. There's been this lead up to it. That Bill's tied into his previous book as well, right? Which is an excellent strategy. But there's a lead into it, right? It's not go for write, pop up. I have a book. People should come find it, right? It's I'm here. I'm writing a book. Let's talk about the themes. Let's talk about the characters. Let's talk about why I'm writing it. Let's talk about who I am, and as you're going. So that when you do publish the book, people have a sense, oh, I've been hearing about this book. Oh, I can't wait to read it. And then you can do a launch. But the launch, as Bill said, it's not a one-off thing. A launch, you think about a rocket launching. It's not like the rocket launches and that's it, and then it just hovers in the air. It's going somewhere, and there's a plan to get it there. And so if you do want to have a launch and you want to get somewhere, then you need to say, this launch is an investment to help me get to that next step, to get me to those ongoing sales, to get me, people reviewing the book that'll get more book sales and more book sales, or whatever the plan is, whatever the strategy is.
This sounds like every creative outlet's biggest trap. And I'll use, and like even for a podcast, you have a launch, a blog, you have a launch. Movie, you have your premiere. TV, your premiere, and all of these eyes are expected to be on it. And yes, first impressions are so important. I don't think we'll get into an area of important first impressions here in a moment, but it's also you can't put what I'm hearing you say is not put everything there, because if it is successful, that's great, but if it's not, that can be very discouraging for you as a promoter.
Yeah, you want to, it's not about how much you put into the launch. It's about knowing what comes after the launch that continues the momentum, that you don't, instead of having momentum that fizzles, having momentum that builds. And I think that's, if you think about it, think about the movies that you have watched again and again and again versus the movies who came and then disappeared and nobody thought about them. Nobody's seen them. They're not on Netflix. Who cares? Nobody wants to watch them. If you want to, and there are movies and TV shows that just throw stuff out there and then they get an audience and then they fizzle and they're gone. Do you want to be that? Or do you want to be that book, the movie that people want to read over and over again, who enjoy going back and looking at different passages, who, hand it off to friends? You're right. Same thing with movies, right? You can write a one-off, it's trendy, it'll be funny today, but nobody cares tomorrow. Or you can write good literature, as Bill was talking about, that will really last a long time. And people will come back to it over and over because it's that good, right?
I would like to add, I'm just going to say basically what Melody said, but my own version of it is if folks are asking for advice, and I always say how to write is easy. Why you write, if you can answer that, which is just my saying exactly what you said, Melody. Yeah. If you can answer why you're writing, then everything else becomes simple. And I use the word easy. It's not easy. It's simple. It's not easy. There's tons of books on how to write. But why you write that would address everything from the importance of that launch event, and maybe that's all you want to do. And then kudos. And I would also say, if you want to just print something off of your printer and put it on a zip drive or a 3-ring binder on your shelf to share with no one or 1 or 2 people, and that was your objective, then you're very successful, and kudos to you. I also have chums who, they want to be on the talk show sofa du jour. And I won't say a name, because invariably whoever's the talk show host du jour, they'll fall out of favor soon enough. But eventually, if you want to be whatever famous means, if that's important to you, kudos. But I would say take care to define what that means. Otherwise, you're chasing an ambiguous goal that you can't possibly reach. But that's my version. Determine the why, and everything else will fall into place.
So I'm going to push this. Why do both of you write? Why not? If you brought it up, why not? Let's.
Yeah. Bill, you or me?
You, Melody, please.
Okay. Yeah, me. Why do I write? So I some of what I write, and a lot of what I write actually, is for me only. I do a lot of, I'll journal. That's just for me. I do a lot of that. Now, my memoir, and my memoir is not a published book yet, because I actually turned it into a one-woman show first. Before I did the book, I did the one-woman show. And so after I did that, well, let me tell you the process of writing my memoir, because I think this could be really helpful for people who want to write a memoir, because this is going to answer some questions that I think people have that they don't ask. A lot of people are afraid. They're not sure what to put down. They're not sure what to write, what to make public, what to say about other people. So my advice when you're writing a memoir, pardon me, and what I did was I wrote it for me the first time, 100% for me. I didn't think about anyone else. I didn't think about an audience. It was only for me. And then when that was done, I looked at what I had, because that was really cathartic, and that was such a healthy thing to do. And then when that was done, I rewrote it for a family member to get permission. Then so I wrote this is for permission memoir, right? This is the kinds of things I might say about other people. And I gave that to people, and I got yes. And then I turned it into a solo show, which I'm not saying everyone has to do. I'm not saying stand up for an hour by yourself on stage and do that. But that's what I did. But what I would say then is, once you have something that people are good with, give it to a developmental editor. Because I mean, I'm an editor, but I couldn't look at my memoir with an audience's eyes. Even though I do that for other people, my own memoir was so close. I gave it to this amazing editor, and she said, this is where I think you should start. This is where I think you should end. This is where I think you should peak. And I said, oh my God, you're right. And so I rewrote that version. And now I'm in the final editing stages of the memoir, which I'll be working on over the fall. And so it's been a very long process from, writing just for me. And so why do I write? I write just for me. And then why do I write? Well, I wrote this, and people said, started talking about it, and people said, this is a really important story, and I think you have something to say. And so I decided, okay, I am going to turn this into something for an audience. And then I went down that path. And now my memoir, really, I'm writing it because I want people who come from, a highly abusive past. Your father's a criminal. It's tough, right? You come from a place where you feel like, this we have this religious underpinning, right? Sins of the father. If you feel that, this might be the book for you. And that this book, and after the show, people came up to me and said, oh my God, thank you. This really, really helped me. So why am I publishing it? I'm publishing it because I have strong belief that there are people in the world who feel shame and fear and pain. And I think this is going to help them work through that. And that's why I'm publishing it. So those are a variety of reasons to write, all one book. So I think there are lots of reasons to write, but there's a good start to that.
Well, then you expand. Sorry if I interrupted here, but what I'm hearing is not only why you write, why do you want to publish? That's another question.
Yes, I think you need a reason to publish. So I had a reason to write it to begin with, And my reason to publish is a very different reason to publish than why I wrote it to begin with. And I think if you're considering writing a memoir, I think that's a really good path to do. Just write it for yourself. And then if it's something that you think is going to be help the world, then publish it for the audience. But those are two very different books, just to say. My book has gone through several huge revisions or rewrites to get it to the point from me looking after myself to me writing to an audience to help them look after themselves. Those are two entirely different books.
I'm going to take this opportunity to gush a little bit. If you do get the opportunity to see Melody's Woman Play, man, when I saw that as part of the Vancouver Fringe Festival, and I felt lucky to get a ticket, the house was packed. It's very, very good and special and empowering and cathartic and healing. There's music and that took great courage to not only write and to share that story, but being able to make that connection and empower a lot of other folks. Melody, that was remains a very, very special thing. And
thank you. And it was a creative act because there's dialogue, there's monologue, there's poetry, there's song, and so there's something beautiful in the creative act. And so just that's another reason to write. And Bill, I'll turn it over because I know Kevin wants to know why you write as well. So.
Okay. Well, at the risk of letting that pendulum swing in the opposite direction, first off, I have to share one with you that I saw on a sitcom just the other night, where the fellow's talking to his life coach, and he says to her, she says, "What's really important to you?" He says, I'd like to write a play." She says, "Well, what's stopping you?" He said, "Oh, it's really, really hard." And I think that's the truth of the matter. Quite, as I say, opposite pendulum swing to Melody's work. I wrote my first substantive travel memoir, 100,000 word manuscript, because I too liked that process, like a painter putting paint onto canvas. That felt good, crafting the words in a manner in which you want to share your feelings and sensory experience with someone else, and then reading it objectively and thinking, yes, I think I've captured a little something there. In that first book, I published 12 copies to share with the immediate family and friends. And I thought, hey, some of this makes me laugh too. I had no intention of changing the world or necessarily empowering folks. I had spent a lot of my life reading travel memoir, travel literature, and I enjoyed escaping with individuals who could communicate a sense of a wonder and experience and adventure from your favorite armchair. And invariably, if you read enough stuff in that genre and you've got that desire for a creative outlet, it's going to be bubbling up in you. And there can be a million titles with a similar sort of a perspective, and yet every book is unique because it's in the voice of that author. So in creating those first a dozen copies of that one book, and the courage it takes to then share with individuals, and then folks saying, "Gosh, that made me laugh," or "That made me cry," and "That made me feel good," and "Oh, you really ought to share this." And not people saying that just beyond my mom, people whose opinions I thought, oh, they may be saying something sincere. And then you got a couple of bits of a nice praise come in, and then thinking, hey, perhaps there's something to this. And perhaps I want to see how far I can take this creatively. And I've always been comfy wearing two hats. I can be an artist and still have a little bit of a business acumen about it. And I think that's a very comfortable road to walk, a foot in each of those camps. And I think I got no problem with monetizing something that is purely artistic and creative. I think that is quite all right.
Now, thanks, Bill. Can I just say, Kevin, thanks, Bill. I think that's a really important thing to say, because our society has this, this thing about art, artists shouldn't look for money. No, art is worth money. Art is valuable. Art is one of the most valuable things we have, whether it's a painting or a poem or a novel. Art is so important, and artists should ask to be paid what they're worth. And so thank you for saying that, Bill. I think that's a really important statement. Sorry, Kevin.
No,
You
you're
love my
right.
little rant?
I totally, it is a road I wanted to go down, but I totally agree. And I think that this is one of it's a weakness I specifically find in Canadian art culture where and I'm pointing at me, and I include me in this, we
Yeah.
are afraid of promoting our work and asking for money. In the US, they're like, give it to me, man. I'm awesome. Right? In Canada, we just don't do that. It's like, no, yeah, right. And it's been part of the struggle within the industry of, like, there is great Canadian writing, great Canadian shows, great Canadian stuff out there, but it just doesn't get promoted and it doesn't get supported. And part of that is from a government perspective. I'll agree with that, but it's also within the community. We don't do it for each other, and I think that's part of, you can blame one party or the other for this, but we don't do it ourselves. And that's the bigger issue, I think.
Yeah. Bill, you.
Well, what's popped into my mind is reading this morning latest newsletter from the Writers Union of Canada, and our new chair, the chair sharing her sentiments as a Canadian writer, and a lovely forthright sort of sharing her sentiments. When my peers are doing well, I'm so proud of them and for them, and so very jealous and resentful. So it's this fascinating community that doesn't speak to the a Canadian psyche versus generalizing an American perspective on beating one's chest, but that the tall poppy syndrome. You can see something similar amongst Kiwis and Aussies and Canadians and Americans, or there's a self-deprecatory, a UK approach to this. But I think if you're just being true to yourself, and at some point the aw shucks gets a tad tiresome. And by the same token, I don't care for too much chest beating, but I think if you're just sincere, that authenticity comes through in your writing or whatever you're speaking to your art, and water finds its course. So I think the folks that are proud and sharing stuff with sincerity, it finds an audience irrespective of what side of the border you're on.
That's true, but I also think, and all of those things are true. But the other side of that, I think, to build on what Melody is saying, it's not only about the payment, which is very obviously very important. It's the perception, because I think a lot of people don't look at art, writing, all of this as a job. They look at this as a hobby, not a job. They don't recognize that there's work. So down the street from we were talking about what we see outside our house. Down the street from my house, they're rebuilding their house. Then people will look at that and say, that's legitimately, they're working. But we that are sitting at home writing, we're not considered working. And that to me is also a perception that needs to, I think, change as well.
There's a great Margaret Atwood story that may be true. Apparently she was at a soiree, a function, and the brain surgeon says to her, yeah, when I retire, I'm thinking of writing a book. To which she says, that's funny. I thought when I retired from this, I'd dabble in brain surgery. Which speaks to that whole perception. And I think if you behave in a certain manner, people may say, hey, you're going to be treated the way you carry yourself. Yes, horrible things can happen. But generally speaking, if you're carrying yourself, which your art is your brand, in a certain manner, I think it's going to be perceived more often than not in a certain way based on your perspective, based on your confidence and your courage. And that may be a little bit of a tough stance. He said in a Canadian apologetic manner, but I'm sorry. If you're looking someone square in the eye and saying, this is what I do, that's going to resonate. Not arrogance, but a confidence and a certainty I would toe that line and tell anyone the same thing. And then I think those individuals that live by those standards would be quite delighted with how their art is perceived as value added work.
Yeah, I agree. We as creatives, we need to value our own work. And when we meet people who don't value it, say, well, you're not my people. Instead of internalizing it's not valuable, we need to be able to look at the person and say, well, you're obviously not my people, and move on, rather than listening to those messages, right? It is, in the end, going to be up to us. And if we, as creatives, work together and lift each other up, I think that's possible. But I think that, there is a place for organized groups, right? You talked about the Writers Union of Canada. It's a place where people who want to write will be lifted up. Although, there may be jealousies of success, but it's still a place where, despite anything, they will lift you up, right? You want organizations like that.
And I will add to that, because in online groups, invariably that group does show the most genuine support and encouragement. Even if there is at times a little bit of envy, but more often than not, that drives folks to maybe improve their craft a little more, which I think is a healthy perspective.
Yeah.
So Bill, on that, talking about craft, tell us about your book, Gone Viking. Maybe let's start there, and then I want to dig into this a little bit, the writing, the process of how you've gotten to this.
Okay, so I'd spent decades as a fan of good travel literature, travel writing, travel log, travel memoir. I'm not talking about travel books. I'm talking about someone sharing their experience as they experience new things around wherever they are. And I always say somewhat adamantly, travel doesn't have to be about getting on a jet and increasing your carbon footprint. You can be in your room. If you've got ambulatory issues, you can write beautiful travel memoir without leaving your home. Okay, it's about sensory experience. It's about experiencing the world. It's about wonder and serendipity. There. Having said that, as a fan of travel literature, I wanted to share in my own voice some of my own experiences. And I have been privileged to see a good chunk of the globe on my own, as well as with my wife, Deb. And one of the things that really hit home for me, we were at a Viking ship museum in Roskilde, which is outside of Copenhagen in Denmark. And there was a map on the wall of all the places these Norsemen, or these Danes, these Vikings, had explored. And it was pretty much the top half of the planet. And like a kid in a candy store, I thought, I want to go to there, and there being almost anywhere and everywhere. And I'm playing off in Gone Viking, a travel saga, my first travel memoir that we were speaking of. I'm playing off the fact that Viking was originally a verb in Scandinavia. Small v, it meant to go voyaging, or it was like the grand tour. These Scandinavian nations were thriving and healthy. The populations were growing. And so the younger generation was going abroad, finding new land to settle, trade routes, this and that. Yes, there was raiding and fighting like any historical nation, but they made some advancements in seafaring and were able to explore a huge amount of the globe, and they've influenced a lot of Western culture through language and facets of trade and culinary and historical, and from a literary perspective, going from an oral tradition to the written words, the Icelandic sagas and Norse sagas. There's a great history behind the Vikings. Now I'm using a capital V. So I played off that and spent a number of years trekking around the Northern Hemisphere and documenting some adventure, some history, some humor, my personal Viking, small v, voyaging experience. And that's where that first book came from. And then my sales pitch, as I choose to put a stamp on there, I referred to some literary awards, and it was recently named the Miramichi Readers 2021 Very Best Book in Nonfiction. So I'm terribly proud of that. And that's also singing praises to my publishing team and supporters and friends like Melody and other writing groups, and Kev, you and others with podcasts and writer sort of outlets and part of this community. So that's me sort of waving all of our flags concurrently. But how's that for an answer to what the Viking book sort of is and stands for?
Yeah, cool. Great. How did you, because there's two of this, so I'm curious where in this process that you decided, how did you get to part two? Like, how do you get it?
So a combination of things. There was a lot of writing, and I felt like engaging and entertaining stories that we pared down to create the first book, a nice readable length, a 90,000 word manuscript. And to our delight, it's been well received by folks around the globe. And so there was a demand for some more of that. And this was a great example of how does one write a travel memoir over the past couple of years of travel restrictions. And I thought that in and of itself was an exciting challenge. And so I was able to draw from, again, personal experience and some mildly adventurous excursions around a lot of the globe over a 15-year period. So both before, during, and after those travels of Gone Viking, a travel saga, I've pulled that together, further building on the notion of this small v Viking, and I have been following in the footsteps of some of history's greatest explorers. Many of them are Scandinavians, and many of them are not. So in this Gone Viking 2, Beyond Boundaries, I also like the notion of just sort of getting out of the comfort zone, pushing that a little bit further, not only geographically, but from a literary and an artistic perspective. And you'll find the book, not unlike Norse sagas, there's an element of dreaminess to it. We're on an adventure together in real time. And that was something I always loved as a reader, and I'm hoping I'm sharing in a worthwhile manner as a writer now as well.
Interesting.
Nice.
So is there going to be a part 3?
My publisher would like that, and I would like that too. And we'll see how that plays out with our global travel restrictions. But I'm quite confident this would be conducive to a trilogy.
Cool.
Fun.
One other topic I wanted to make sure, and then maybe before we wrap up, if there's anything else we need to talk about, because there's probably lots. But one of the things that I have learned from Melody is the importance of a book cover. But before I do that, when you read, do you prefer the handheld book, or do you read on the computer, like on the iPad, the Kindle, or whatever other device that there would be out there?
I do both. Believe it or not, I have both books that I read. Real books or paper, and I read some books on my reader. The lighter the book is, the more likely I am to read it on the reader. The heavier the book is, and the more a book has something where I want to go back and forth, like there's a map at the beginning, or there's something where I want to be able to kind of flip around it, the more likely I am to get the actual book. The heavier the topic, the more likely I'm going to get the book, because I want to go back and read the beginning of something and to kind of take it in. So there's my answer.
I also enjoy both. The last 3 months, I've had a great deal of fun making a point of visiting as many independent bookstores around BC as possible, because we could travel within our province safely and with being vaccinated. And so that was very much about going into a store, picking up paper, and making some friends along the way.
So with that, we bring up the topic of the book cover. And Melody has said, and Bill, you probably heard this as well, is the book cover is the promise of what your book is going to be about. Let's talk about the important, and it may be something that a lot of writers don't think about when they do this, but it is probably the most important thing that you do need to think of. One of the most important things that you do need to think about. Talk about the process of creating a book cover how you do it, where you get that, all of that sort of stuff.
Do you want to go, Bill, or should I?
Please go ahead, Melody.
Okay. I think the first thing I want to say is a lot of us now are shopping online. So when you're thinking about, if you're thinking about publishing a book, think about what are people going to see if you're on Amazon or any other, site, Goodreads, anything at all. What are people going to see? The first thing they're going to see about the book. And it's that little thumbnail of the cover. And so if they can't read the title, if they can't, in that tiny little thing, if they can't read the title, if they don't have there's not some image that is engaging, in the next book, it has this engaging image and the title is easy to read and the title is suggestive of what the book is about. Which book are people going to click through to? So that's to explain just a simple explanation of the importance. So, you need something that on those tiny little thumbnails, people will go, oh, what's that? Click through, learn more. And then what you need that image and that title to get people to go, oh yeah, this looks cool. Read the description. And then the description has to get them to add it to the cart and buy it. Right. So things, people like, I'll just, throw something together. It's like, well, if you don't have a visual eye and you don't understand the importance of people being immediately engaged by the cover, then I say don't do the cover yourself. But that's the thing. You want something that's truly engaging. So how do you go about that? I'm probably not the best person to answer because I'm not a cover designer, but I know that cover designers will take a really good description. They don't read the whole book, but they'll take a good description. They'll get a sense of the book, and then they'll find an image that speaks to something in the book that is intriguing, engrossing, engaging, and they'll bring that to life. And then they'll make sure that obviously the cover designer doesn't come up with a title, but you need a title that is engaging. But the cover designer will make sure that the picture is engaging, engrossing, compelling, and that the title stands out so that it can be read easily. So because that's the hook to go through to the page on the book and then read the description. Bill, do you want to add to that?
Sure. You've said it well. In my personal experience, a couple of covers that I've been very proud of, I've employed designers, but I don't want to shell out too much money. So I've found folks who that wasn't their go-to or their forte, but they were excited about it and wanted to add that to their portfolio. So talented, capable people who were willing to do it for not too much money, and subsequently came up with beautiful things that were indicative of the content of the books. And a neat little example was I started out self-publishing Gone Viking, a travel saga, and employed someone to create a beautiful blue cover. It's outdoorsy and water-ish. Beautiful blue cover. It won an award for design. And then when the traditional publisher, RMB, took over, they said, we got to change this cover. I thought it was a beautiful cover. It's an award-winning cover. They said, yeah, but look at the similar style of books on the shelves. And of course, they all have beautiful blue covers and none of them stand out. Okay, right. I hadn't thought that through. Another interesting one is that, say, you'd be amazed how many books sell based on their spine as well. Not every book is on the shelf cover out. So that was an interesting one. And so going a radically different approach, a very different, so in my case, a Norse runic looking design, which speaks to the book's content, but it pops on the shelf. And when you ask marketers and this and that, that was significant. There's just a couple of personal examples.
So that, like, not the cover, but the side where you're like, when you're at a house, you're like, oh, what's that? Like behind Melody, as an example, the bookshelf there. Yeah, that's important too.
That as well. Just as important.
Now, what about in terms of promotion, getting your excerpts of your book out there? What are some things that you need to think about? Obviously, you don't want to spoil the book, but you also want to make sure that you get people to read the book. Like as an example, Melody, you with Devil's Daughter, I know that you did a specific with the one with the show. There were specific excerpts that you did as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
Yes, there was. Bill, I'll let you start on this, and then I'll continue.
I literally spent a couple of years just building that network, and always leading with, in my past career, a mentor who was sort of a sales-oriented individual. They always said, make sure you're starting by taking something to your prospective customers. Take something to them before you take something from them. So I've always tried my best to lead with a giving, contributing to literary journals. I always make sure I'm cross-promoting wherever possible. I want to wave the flag of other businesses and writing groups and retailers and fellow authors. So after, basically being a fan and a supporter, and it's not just, you never ever lead with a quid pro quo mindset, but invariably folks want to root for you and help you out as well. So I was contributing blog columns for publications, good publications that didn't necessarily have income to pay writers. But then how can we help you? Looking for ways to promote your book. And that was just building a lovely network amongst literary journals and booksellers and supportive writers groups like Author Nation. That was how I built that network. And then, and fellow authors. Folks are asked for praise blurbs. And when they're sincere, invariably we want to help each other out as we go.
Yeah, good points, Bill. Really good points. Promotion isn't always about me, which is exactly what you're saying, right? A lot of the times promotion is about what can I give? When you're, sometimes you get people on a podcast and you're listening and they've written a book and it's a really interesting subject, but they spend the whole time kind of the subtext is buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. And that can be a turnoff. But if I'm listening to a podcast and they're giving me really good information about the subject, I'm then thinking, oh my gosh, I want to go get that book and learn even more and read even more. And this person's an expert and they're generous so I'm going to kind of say what Bill said, right? Build a network, be generous. Don't always talk about your book. Talk about what Go Viking means, for example, is something Bill just did, right? Instead of talking about the book, he said, Viking is actually a verb and this is fun. And I say, well, that's cool information, right? That's exciting. And so I'm going to say be generous. And that's, we could get into details on how to promote a book, but that's a long process. So think in terms of being generous and building your network. One thing I love about the publishing industry is it's not a competitive industry. So if Bill goes out and finds 10 other people writing travel memoirs that he enjoys their memoirs, he loves their memoirs, and he says, hey, let's get together and work together to sell these books, because if I'm reading travel memoirs, I'm not just reading Bill's, I'm reading those other 10 as well. So if all 10 authors say, hey, 10 put on their blog, for example, top 10 travel memoir books, something like that, then if I've read one of their books, I'm looking for more. And if they're suggesting it because they're like theirs, then I'm going to go grab that, because that's what publishing is about. So there's no competition. So the other big message I want to give to authors is collaborate with other authors. We're not selling used cars. We are selling books. And if people read books, they read more and more and more books. So, we're not buying one book like we're buying one used car. We're buying lots and lots of books. So collaborate. It's one of the most powerful things you can do as an author.
Well said.
That's, I think, well said for content creators as well. Any content, yes. Collaborate. Yeah. So two more things keep popping in my head, but this one was for sure. These two were for sure things I wanted to get into. There is ultimately going to be someone that doesn't like your work. There is someone that's going to find that they're not going to enjoy whatever you do, and that's just part of life. So I'm going to ask two different questions on this. How do you deal with that? And I think that I know that that's a broad answer, but I just would love your perspective. And the other thing is talking about giving constructive feedback, as opposed to your book is terrible and no one should read it, as opposed to what worked and what didn't. But we're certainly in an age where it becomes, especially on social media, where it becomes so easy to be bashful of someone we don't know. And we don't recognize the effort that someone has put in.
Yeah. Not every book is for every person, right? And so as long as your book is well thought out, well structured, well written, if somebody doesn't like it, it's not for them. I don't read sports books. Hence, I would never dare give an opinion on a book about a sports team because I don't read them. And I may be a nonfiction expert, but I'm not the right person to give a review on a book that I'm not interested in, that isn't for me. Sometimes I see authors say, I got this really bad review on Amazon, right? And sometimes it just is like 1 star and says the cover was bent. It's like, whoa, that's not about the book. Let's just, first decide, is it really about the book? Or is it something extra? Or, is it that the book isn't for you? So when I review books, what I like to do is, who is this book for? And it's for this audience. And if this audience likes it, then that's great. As in giving feedback, I'll answer as an editor. When I edit books, I want the final product to be the absolute best final product possible. And I understand that this person this has been a labor of love. I mean, Bill, did you say 8 years? This is a labor of love that this person has put in years of their life, a lot of effort, a lot of love, a lot of pain and heartache. And so when I give feedback, I want to do it in a way that is compassionate and sensitive, especially when I am editing memoirs where there's been pain in their past, because sometimes people writing memoirs take feedback personally, even if it's just about the writing, because writing this has been so raw. And so it's really important when you give feedback to an author. If somebody says, here's my book, what do you think? Ask them, what kind of feedback would you like? What are you looking for? Unless they're paying you as an editor, and then you're the professional and you should know what you're doing. But, and if you're writing a review on Amazon, if it's not for you, that's fine. It doesn't mean it's a bad book. So if it's a well-written book, but it's not for you, just say, hey, this would be a great book for, people who love baseball, whatever it is, right? No, I'm not a baseball fan. So I think it's a very complicated question, giving feedback to people, right? So if your book is out there published, you're kind of asking for it. And I think when you see the reviews, you have to understand that not everybody is a professional reviewer. They don't understand how to review. The book may have come late. They may be angry. You just never quite know. And so you need to take every review with a grain of salt if you're an author. And honestly, if you have 100 excellent reviews and no one doesn't like your book, it's like, there's got to be someone out there who doesn't like your book. There's got to be. So when you do get a negative review, it's like, hey, it's okay. It's not for everyone. I don't know if that helps or answers the question at all, but direct me if I'm not giving you what you're looking for.
Well, two things that are coming to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an echo? The first one is, do you, in terms of when you're done writing the book and you're ready at this publish and you're ready to publish and get it out to the books, getting a review from a professional,
mm-hmm.
how important is that? That's one. And, the mental perspective of even someone not liking your book, even if you understand that it's not for everyone, it's still something that delves within, of the labor of love. What are recommendations of therapeutic sort of things do you recommend for dealing with that?
So professional reviews. I think the best reviewer of your book are people who genuinely want to read your book. If they happen to be professional reviewers, awesome. But I'm not interested in giving my memoir to a person who does professional reviews of psychological thrillers, because They're just the wrong person. I don't care how good they are. They're just the wrong person. So the best people to review your book are the people who want to read your book, who are interested in your genre. They are the best people. And then the other question was about how to deal with a bad review.
Yeah, sort of the negative feedback that someone get after you've done,
Yeah, I think I would. So if someone gave me negative feedback on my book, I would walk away for a minute, right? I would then come back, maybe ask a friend to look at it and say, is there anything useful in here for me? Can I learn anything from it? Can I become a better writer, promoter? Can I write a better description? Is there anything in here for me? And if there's not, walk away from it. It's not useful. I know when I did my show, talking to a lot of the other actors and performers, a lot of them, what they do is they don't read any reviews because it throws them off. They get friends to read reviews, and then friends will tell them the good stuff they heard, and they'll reword anything relevant that could be helpful. Aside from that, reviews are great, so that this book has lots of reviews, I'll read it. Yeah, this looks like a book I want to buy. Great for other people thinking to buy the book. Not always good for you. Bill, do you have anything to add? How do you deal with your reviews?
I had an interesting one, and I applaud this individual for being so objective and articulate. And she said, loved your first book, ordered the second one. Having said that, here was a reference you did that offended me, and here's why. So despite my best efforts, on occasion there's going to be something that I couldn't have anticipated that perspective. Absolutely valid, and I valued that. We had a bit of correspondence, and I said, I have learned. Thank you, and we will ensure that going forward, the next iteration, that will never occur again, because she helped me to grow in a manner and changed a perspective that, as I say, despite my best efforts, there's going to be times a white middle-aged male with a privilege cannot possibly empathize fully despite best efforts, right? And so that was a really interesting one, but that was a very articulate, kind, objective critique. If I'm the person that's being asked for advice or feedback, I tend to just do reviews of stuff that I've thoroughly enjoyed, but I will, like you, Melody, always congratulate the author on accomplishing something that many people would like to do and most don't, i.e. in writing a book. And if something really needs to be addressed, invariably, the more we read, the better we write. So I find myself trying to be somewhat Socratic and saying to an individual, why don't you read this book, or check out this author, see what you think, which could be, I like to believe, a proactive, productive way for all of us and other individuals to improve and further hone their craft.
Good point. Good point. Yeah. If you're writing a travel saga, read travel sagas. If you're writing a memoir, read memoirs. If you're writing a psychological thriller, read psychological thrillers. Understand the tropes, understand the structure, the language, the character development of that particular genre. Really good point, though.
Yeah, and I also, the two other things that are coming to my mind that there's a lot of reviewers out there that are doing this for content creation. So they are going to say something that is ridiculously spectacular because it's not about the author, it's about them. They want you to go to them to get the review. Like the best movie reviewer of all time is the late great Roger Ebert, because he never made it about Roger Ebert. He always made it about the movie. Siskel and Ebert were just so fantastic at that. You just don't, I'm going to be a crotchety old man. You just don't see that these days anymore, with these kids and these millennials and stuff. That's not true, but it's very rare that you get that. And the second part of that, this is a sports podcast, Melody, but it is a podcast I would recommend, is it was an interview with a media person in the US, Lindsay Rhodes did, talking about how you treat people that, like athletes that are not playing well, and how you treat interview subjects. And it's just like, you've got to treat them like human beings. Like, even just because, you see a coach that makes a bad decision or a player that makes a terrible play, it's so easy to go on social media and blast them, but understand the process. That's the part that I think I'm trying to get is understanding the process that gets through this and where you get this. Like not to get super political, but the review Jody Wilson-Raybould wrote her memoir and it's published. And I haven't read it yet. I have no idea, but people are already skewing this and they haven't even read the book. They read the excerpt, but they haven't read the book. Right. And that you guys talked about that labor of love. I don't know if it's a labor. It was certainly a labor in a sense of like, this took a lot of work and a lot of guts. And I think no matter where you stand on that needs to be honored and given perspective when someone is writing.
Yes, agreed. Writing a book is a huge undertaking. At least respect the act. Yeah.
Yeah. My last question that I wanted to, it's broad again, but define what you think is a great writer.
Wow. Generally, that's such a tough, because I think to go to genre. What's a great writer? Someone who is willing to dig into their own writing, to, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, to dig and to play and to explore, because when I'm reading, isn't that what I want? Someone who has not lived on the surface, but has like dug through things and excavated deeply, and being willing to go to those places and had, and come up with interesting things. People who have found fun ways to, in Bill's book, right? There's a playfulness and it's fun and there's humor but it's how he has used the language to kind of play with that and bring that to us. So those two pieces, I think, make a good writer, right? Because the proofread, people are always like, oh, I have to get the grammar right. No, you can get a copy editor to do that later. Your job is to dig and excavate and find ways to put words together that is playful and fun and meaningful and makes me think or makes me laugh or makes me feel and brings me there through the sensory experience or whatnot. Bill, do you want to answer that?
Oh, you've said it beautifully. I would say yes. Sincerity and authenticity is what I'm looking for in great writing, and effort. You can see it. Oh, this individual has put some care and thought into sharing a deeply personal sentiment. And I'm echoing your words, Melly, a sensory engagement. I've had no less than 3 books this summer that as I've read, I've taken a moment and just rested it on my chest mid-passage thinking, oh, that's nice. And I'm going to rattle them off. Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass is one. Valerie Perrin's Fresh Water for Flowers, a novel. And a third nonfiction one, Patrick Svensson's The Book of Eels, translated from Swedish. These are gorgeous narrative memoir adjacent stories that you can just see, oh, this individual has put a lot of care into sharing something deeply personal and sincere with their readers. In other words, never ever taking a reader for granted, never ever talking down to your reader. I always like to assume, and I think good writing, you will always read the author probably believes the reader knows a little more than they do. Never ever pandering. And that to me is okay. Putting your readers on a pedestal and ensuring that they're going to get it. You don't have to spoon feed anything. Share something beautiful to the best of your ability. I expect a good writer's next book to always be a bit better than the last, irrespective of where they are on their path in their career. And that's something I take very seriously. If your reader has put time and money and effort into taking something from their wallet to put it into yours, you owe it to them to give them something very, very special. There's my mini soapbox.
Yeah, good. And bringing an experience. You talked about the memoir, right? Bringing an experience to me that I may never, that I couldn't even comprehend, right? That's a beautiful thing.
Cool.
Yeah. I like the idea, the expectation that it should be better the next time. Like, not like, and I don't think that you're being vicious with that or anything like that. It's just you're hoping something will be better, because as you do something, there's always a way to improve.
Growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we did not cover that you hope that we did want to cover?
I don't think so, Kevin. Thank you so much for having us. It's been great. I'm so thrilled to be here with you. I'm so grateful that you did this and that Bill and I had a chance to have this discussion.
Cool.
My feelings, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, Melody. Yes. Thank you, Kev.
All right. Well, tell us how to follow you and all the time of promotion. I hand it to you.
Well, if you're out there and you want to write a nonfiction book, and Author Nation has fiction and poets and everyone on it, but the YouTube channel is generally focused towards nonfiction. So on YouTube, Author Nation; on Facebook, Author Nation; on Instagram, Author Nation. You can find us there. If you want to join a group and learn about writing and planning and publishing and promoting, join us. If you have questions, I am there on all three of them. You can reach out on any platform, and authornationtube.com is the website. Bill, where do people find you?
I will tell you, and I will also reiterate, working with Melody is a joy. You will learn, you will improve your craft. And that's from personal experience. And I'm Bill Arnott. And so you can find my travel memoirs, Gone Viking, a travel saga, and Gone Viking 2, Beyond Boundaries, at any bookstore you like to shop at. I'm a proponent of bookstores, but also on Amazon or through our publisher, RMB, Rocky Mountain Publishing. They've got connections for whatever country you're in to get it direct, or your local retailers.
Cool.
Perfect.
Thank you guys very much again. Follow me, KEVOLE, on Facebook, the Kev Ole Podcast, YouTube, Kevin Olenek. In the midst, as I've taken out the car, thank everyone for listening. There's some tune-ups to work on, but I got the car out. That's the important thing. Subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts, as well as the audio will be out shortly. And we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.